Hello, I am Binayak Bishnu and today I will be talking about macro-microprocess followed in object-oriented design and how it has been helpful in the industry, and I have used an example of Boeing 777 for the case study. Now macro-microprocess is widely used process for object-oriented design, and it is used to design complex systems and applications, and both the top down and the bottom up approaches. And at the high level, it's the macro process that works, which defines the entire architecture and the design of the system, while the micro process is the one that goes deeper into the details and focuses on the implementation. Now, in the macro process, the system is divided into several components and subsystems, and these subsystems are then defined, the interrelationships are defined, and how they react to one another. All these features are defined. And in the microprocess, these every subsystem or every module is further broken down into the various components, and each component is then worked on individually to facilitate the system's requirements and all the demands that is to be fulfilled. Now, once the components are designed, they are obviously tested, and each of them are individually tested to whether to see whether they are matching the demands, whether they are matching the stability, the system requirements. And after all of these components have been individually tested, they are then integrated into the common system using the macro step as described. And then this entire system is tested and validated before being deployed. Now, the use of macro and microsystem in object-oriented design helps to build scalable and modular systems, and these are also extensible in the future and are also easily uh, they can be easily tested and broken down into their formative components. So, in conclusion, macro microprocess is a very valuable process and is very popular and widely used in the industry currently. This brings me to the case study which I found for this topic, that is Boeing 777 and how they have used macro and microprocess in their own developings of the avionics system for the Boeing 777. Now, the macro process, as it is meant, as I mentioned above, was that this system helps define the overall architecture. Now, Boeing used this macro process to for various of its steps. For example, it was the requirements analysis where they defined what are the system requirements, what are the customer requirements, what are the safety standards, and the regulatory requirements. And all these are not really into details, but nevertheless they are applicable for the entire architecture. Next, we have the system architecture design, the component designs, the component development. So first the design and the specification and the development was done. Then the components were integrated. Now, as I mentioned, that the microprocess develops the components individually, which are then integrated into the system using the macroprocess. So here's where the component integration takes place. Then we have the overall systems testing. Now, this is not for each component, but rather after integration, the whole system as a whole is tested. Next is, of course, the deployment. Now, overall, this macro process helped Boeing generate the high-level architecture and also to integrate its system, its components into one entire architecture. Next, we have the microprocess. Now, the microprocess is obviously detailed, as I mentioned above, and these involve the object-oriented design, the basic designs and defining the classes, then the implementation of this design, then the unit testing. Now, unit testing is the most important part because this is where individual components are tested and verified before they are integrated. And now this is obviously depending on the model used while development. This is either an iterative process or an end product, depending on the components as well. And then the integration testing. Now, integration testing is like a bridge because now we have the individual components separately, and now we want to integrate into one system. Now, these individually have to be tested if they can be integrated. Now, there are various input output modalities and various other interdependencies between these modules and later the subsystems, which are composed of these components. So this integration testing is obviously important. But then you have the system testing and maintenance. Maintenance of was component wise, and obviously it is also on the system wide. So this is a short description of how the microprocess helped Boeing 777 develop its model. So overall, the macro and the microprocess together are quite important, and they have been being used for a very long time, and they're still very popular. There have been advances, there have been modifications made to this model, but the basic structure of the model is as described in my speech. So this is the example which I took for Boeing 777. There are various other industries, not only just about various companies, but rather various industries use this to develop their services, the infrastructure, and various other components. In all, macro microprocess is a very important tool which can be used to safely and securely and efficiently develop scalable, maintainable, and extensible projects.